Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on today's town hall. We have a very special guest with us today, and this is a continuation of my criminal justice reform town hall series. And I have been so wanting the Pennsylvania Innocence Project as my guest because I think they speak truly to what is broken and what can happen when the system is broken. And there's the clock. And so I really want to thank Liz DeLosa. She is my guest. She's the managing attorney for the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So just so people, for people who don't know, can you tell us like how and why the Innocence Project started and what you do? I know you have some slides, so you should be able to share your screen. If you want to share your slides as they become relevant or one after another to guide the conversation, that's entirely up to you. So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. My name is Liz DeLosa. I'm the managing attorney for the Pittsburgh Office of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. I'm just gonna present a couple of slides, but like Patty mentioned, please just interrupt me with questions. As I share my screen, I won't be able to see all of your faces, so please just speak up and interrupt me. I think it's a much more informative conversation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in any order. So please don't let my slides dissuade you from asking a question whenever you have it. So let me just share my screen with you here. Patty, are you able to make me a co-host? It says that the participant screen sharing has been disabled.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me see. Okay, try that. That should work.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. So like I said, I'm the managing attorney for the Pittsburgh office of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. The Pennsylvania Innocence Project is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to free those who have been convicted of crimes that they did not commit and to protect the innocent from being convicted. We have two offices, one in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is our headquarters, and one in Pittsburgh. We opened our office in Philadelphia in 2009. So I'm sure everyone has heard of the Innocence Project. And there are many innocence organizations all over the United States. We are all independent nonprofit organizations. We're loosely affiliated through an innocence network that has a annual conference in which we get together and do kind of training seminars, but unfortunately we're not affiliated through national funding. So we are all independently funded through private funders, mostly small funders like individuals who just get on the internet and hit the donate button on our individual websites. 60% of our annual budget are small donators. And so the Innocence Project is an office out of New York. It's an organization out of New York that started in the early 1990s and started doing DNA litigation in the early 1990s. They were kind of the very first innocence organization. They were started by Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, and one of the most famous innocence organization. Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld started to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of requests from Pennsylvania inmates asking for their help, and not just DNA requests, but requests based on eyewitness identification and incentivized or snitch testimony, faulty forensic science cases, cases from Pennsylvania residents based on a variety of ways in which our criminal justice system had broken down that innocence organization just couldn't address because they were doing only DNA litigation. And so they reached out to a number of lawyers in Philadelphia and said, based on the number of requests that we're getting here from Pennsylvania, you guys need an innocence organization. You have to start addressing these wrongful convictions in your state. And so in 2008, a number of Philadelphia lawyers started the Pennsylvania Innocence Project in Philadelphia. And in 2009, when we opened our doors, we already had 600 letters from Pennsylvania inmates asking for our help. And at that point, we had one lawyer and one office manager. We just started to dig in. And in 2016, and from that point on, we just started litigating throughout the entire Commonwealth. We've always been a statewide organization. 2016, we decided that we needed a second office, and so we opened the Pittsburgh office. That's when I came on board. At that point, I was a federal public defender in the Virgin Islands, and so I moved from the Virgin Islands back to Pittsburgh. I was a public defender in Pittsburgh prior to moving to the Virgin Islands, but the Innocence Project called me back from paradise to open the office here in Pittsburgh. And we are inundated with requests. Every year we receive 500 to 600 requests from Pennsylvania inmates asking for our help.
And how many cases can you do a year? If you get that many requests, how many can you help?
Right. So we have a backlog. How many we actually litigate. So we're litigating in a number of counties here in Pennsylvania, and I will go through kind of like how we process our requests, but it is a lengthy, multi-stage process. And there are hundreds of cases in each and every stage as we speak.
Wow.
So there's kind of not an easy answer for how many cases we are addressing at once. Hundreds.
I guess the better question would be, can you address them all? Like, are you
No.
big enough? Are you well enough funded to handle all that you need?
No, absolutely not. We definitely have a backlog of cases that have written to us, in 2013, 2014, that are still waiting for this in-depth review where we just gather every single piece of paper that has ever been created on that case to determine whether there's a legitimate claim of innocence. And I'll tell you a little bit more about, that stage and how you kind of get to that stage, how we determine whether your case warrants that stage. But no, there's hundreds of cases that are waiting for that in-depth review. No, we're not.
I just wanted to stress that you're definitely in need of more funds and help. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's more requests than we can get to in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. There are innocent people who have written to us in 2013, 2014 that are still waiting for us to get to them.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately, that is the kind of the one of the issues, and I will talk about as many as I can get to today. Of the problem is that we are missing a whole population. So one of the things I'm going to tell you about now is, what is an exoneration? Well, an exoneration is a legal term. We only count those people who have been officially cleared of the crime for which they were convicted. So I'm going to go through some statistics with you, some numbers. But those numbers are officially skewed in one direction. And so when I give you these numbers, I want you to be aware that there are hundreds, thousands of people that are not counted within these numbers. And that's for a variety of reasons. And so we only achieve an exoneration when that person's crime has been officially cleared. That takes us anywhere from 5 to 7 years to achieve when we start to litigate. And so I've told you now that it takes us years and years and years even to get to the review stage. And so there's a whole population of people that we unfortunately never get to, who have shorter sentences. And so I'll explain that a little bit better kind of as we get in here.
Okay.
So as you, since 1989, the National Registry of Exonerations tells us that there are just over 2,600 exonerations nationwide. Unfortunately, that only kind of captures a tiny, tiny percentage of wrongful convictions, because what we're counting is only those people who have been kind of officially cleared. What happens in real life is that we go through that very lengthy review process. And many of our clients are presented, once the Commonwealth, once the government sees that we have a good claim, and that we very well may win on appeal or win a new trial, our client is offered something called an Alfred plea or a no contest plea, something where they don't have to admit guilt, but the conviction remains. And so instead of litigating for 5 to 7 years longer, remaining incarcerated longer, the conviction will remain, but the person will be released back to their life, will be released back to their family. And so that person makes the very, very difficult decision to take that plea. And so they are never counted amongst this number. We have, a couple of clients who have made those very difficult decisions. And then we also have a number of people who, are serving 10 to 20-year sentences, who max out that 20-year sentence before they ever get any kind of relief, and are totally missed within this population.
Wow.
So for example, if you are wrongly convicted of a burglary and you are sentenced to 5 to 10 years, you may not even reach the review stage, let alone the post-conviction litigation stage, where you would have enough time even to be exonerated.
And then, of course, if they take the Alfred plea, the good thing is they're out of prison, but the bad thing is that conviction stays on their record forever, and then affects their ability to get a job, to get housing. So it's a horrible decision that they have to make, especially when they're
decision.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I have a client right now who, is serving a life sentence. He was a juvenile when he was convicted. He is convicted of murdering one of his very good lifelong best friends, and he is facing the decision of having to be resentenced as a juvenile and having, an opportunity to live his life, or pursuing his very good, although uncertain, innocence claims. He has 2 daughters. He wants to be home with his family. He does not want to say that he committed a crime against a loved one that he did not do. It's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. And maybe you're going to cover this later, and if you are, I apologize, but how long does it take? Like you're saying, they have to make that choice between going home or waiting to be proven innocent. How long is that time frame usually to be proven innocent, where that's gone from your record forever and you're out? Like what additional time are they looking at if they choose that option?
I mean, it's very uncertain, right? We could litigate for this particular client, we could litigate for the next 3 to 7 years and still not win. Still never prove him innocent, and be in the same situation where he would simply be resentenced as a juvenile and have him serve longer in prison than he would have had he just been resentenced now. And so it's a very difficult thing to advise him, because God forbid I advise him to pursue the innocence claims, and he spends 1 day longer away from his family. But then I don't want him to admit to anything he didn't do, right? And so negotiating, obviously I can work very, very hard to negotiate that plea so that he doesn't have to say anything he didn't do, and I will. But you're right, that Alfred plea, even when he's not admitting guilt, he will remain convicted of a first-degree homicide for the rest of his life. It will affect him for the rest of his life.
And
I got a question.
Please, yeah.
With the Alfred plea, if he were to take the Alfred plea, doesn't that deny him the ability to file civil suit for wrongful conviction and incarceration? Therefore, he would want to have served that time against his will for a crime he didn't commit, and then he can't sue the state or the county in which it transpired in for reimbursement of time spent and time wasted in the prison.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you bring up a really good point. So, yes, he will be convicted of first-degree homicide. He will not be able to sue civilly. Another couple of things to consider. So suing civilly here in Pennsylvania is even when you are exonerated, you are officially exonerated, it is very difficult because we have what's called absolute immunity for prosecutors and for law enforcement. One of the things that the Pennsylvania Innocence Project has been working towards policy-wise and legislatively is for those immunity legislation to be brought down, so that law enforcement and prosecutors who act maliciously, who egregiously, hide evidence and who have misconduct, can be sued civilly and are liable civilly, don't have absolute immunity. The other thing is that Pennsylvania is only one of 15 remaining states that we have zero compensation for the wrongfully convicted. So you can serve decades of your life in prison for a wrongful conviction. You can be completely exonerated, and there is no compensation for the years you have spent in prison for a crime you didn't commit. And so your only remedy is to try to sue civilly, which is here not a very viable remedy at all. is a very difficult remedy. And so we have been pushing compensation for the wrongfully convicted here in Pennsylvania for the last 7 to 8 years, and are hoping that this conversation will continue. In the most immediate political climate, it has started to really be something that our Pennsylvania legislators have been interested in talking about. And so continue, for all of those on the call, please contact your local legislators and tell them that you are interested in talking about compensation for the wrongfully convicted.
Yeah.
Do you think the 13th Amendment plays a vital role in the state of our government and the way people are prosecuted, being as though people rescind to the status of a slave once convicted or charged with a crime? Do you think that prohibits people from getting into court and getting justice and getting the ability for their case to be heard? Because that's like a loophole that legitimately authorized servitude in the country. So if we remove that off the table and freed slaves is freed slaves, people are considered free citizens of this nation, do you think that will change the narrative when it comes to policies that state that there's no compensation from wrongful conviction and all the different things that hinder people when coming in pro se or with the prison society to fight an abuse of discretion with the courts or district attorney or false imprisonment?
Yeah, so let me just turn to a couple of slides ahead here. So I think some of the most powerful things I can tell you is like about the people I represent, and I will jump to that in a few minutes. But one of the things I see on an everyday basis is that wrongful convictions disparately impact Black and brown men. You will see that the more serious the charge is, more likely that a minority person will be wrongfully convicted of that charge. So if you are accused of murder, it is 50% more likely that you will be wrongfully convicted of that charge. Sexual assault, it is 60% more likely that you will be convicted of that charge, and 55% more likely, if you are Black or brown, that you will be wrongfully convicted of drug possession or drug sale. Again, just like another way of saying it, it is 7 times more likely that you will be wrongfully convicted of homicide if you are minority.
Yeah, I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact through experience. But
so just, I mean, it's just, and that just, I can just like kind of like run through very quickly, as you can like see, my clients' faces, their beautiful faces. The men and women that we represent are Black and brown, majority Black and brown. And so there is really no, from my perspective, in my opinion, there is no denying that the criminal justice system disparately impacts Black and brown men and women.
Yeah.
Can we emphasize that? Because, when you have the deniers who are kind of listening to the propaganda out there, their thing is, just look at the populations in the prison, right? That proves that this group of people or that group of people is more prone to, committing crimes. But that is not true. They're not more prone to that. They're not doing it more than other people. They're caught.
They're just targeted.
That's right. They're caught in a system that is
That targets them.
racially biased, that is targeting those people of color. They are innocent, like you just said, sitting in prison. That's
But
why.
you gotta think about what transpired in the United States after freeing of the slaves. They had to create a mechanism to reinstitute slavery, but they did it in a way that is legal. That's how they utilized the 13th Amendment as a loophole.
Right.
Servitude shall not be practiced in the United States unless the event of a crime is committed, basically. So if you target a certain demographic and assume that they're committing a crime, or you hold them delinquent in a crime, then you can reinstitute servitude. And when you look at the population of prisoners, there's a reason why it's predominantly people of color. That's by design, and it's going to always be systematically oppressive and racial towards people of color. The only way to really change that narrative is to put like-minded people into the system, integrate it, and change it from the inside out, and also work towards amending the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is the one amendment that justifies any racial prejudice and bias in our nation when it comes to judicial misconduct and a blatant disregard for humanity when it comes to incarcerating them. And I've been in this system. I've seen how it was. Like, I was sentenced to 1.5 to 10 years for a misdemeanor drug possession. It was less than a gram of cocaine, and they gave me 1.5 to 10 years for it. Whereas there was another guy being seen in the very same courtroom caught with 3 ounces of powder, and he got probation because he was white. So it's not like it's not readily available for us. It's obvious. And you got these judges like Judge Clark and all these other different judges that abuse their discretion because they have ulterior motives when it comes to Black and brown individuals. And also in Pennsylvania, the prison system replaced mining and digging for ore and metals and things. So when that system failed, they had to reboot the economic system, so they replaced it with prisons. There's 26 prisons in Pennsylvania. That's not no coincidence. It's designed to entrap and ensnare a certain population to generate revenue. Every place that them prisons is located in, there was a system in which their economic system failed because of mining. Just look at all the different towns. They're all near mining towns or close to failed societies. They put them prisons in there, and they send people in a way of nepotism, generation after generation of people to have a certain agenda that are okay with incarcerating and locking people behind cells and brutalizing them. And it's not like we don't know it. And the prison society doing is excellent work, is brilliant work. Y'all should be funded by the government. Y'all should be a part of a mechanism to do more. Y'all shouldn't be scrambling for scraps to do what y'all should be doing and what needs to be done. They know the system is wrong. Why do they make y'all fight to free people for something they did wrong? And that's the sad part about our society. And the only real thing we can do is hold these legislators responsible and accountable. Vote them out of office, put people in there who see what's wrong with our system. Because every time a Black male or a Black female is placed in prison, the family nucleus fails. These kids aren't being guided. And what they do, they become part of the same system of recidivism to commit crimes or be targeted for crimes and placed in the same burden of prison. That's the real issue with our society. And I've had this talk with U.S. Senator Bob Casey. I've had this talk with Sharice Street and many different other officials. And we know the problem, we recognize the problem, but how do we get our government to amend the 13th Amendment? How do we get them to hold themselves accountable for the atrocities that's been done to a demographic of people for over 500 years?
Liz, do you have suggestions on that? I was going to cover, what we can do later, but I mean, it seems like a good place to plug it in here. And also, what are the reasons that innocent people end up in jail? I think this is also good to plug that in because it's, there's a multitude of reasons. Why would somebody confess to something they didn't do? Things like that, I think, are typical questions people would have.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some of the contributing factors and things that kind of I see on a regular basis as to why our criminal justice system fails. This is certainly not an exhaustive list. It is, there are a number of reasons that we're not going to talk about today. Please feel free to bring them up, continue to bring them up. But these are the reasons that we see that are statistically high, right? Mistaken witness IDs are one of the most significant reasons. Now, they look like they only occur in 30% of cases here, but in homicide cases and capital cases, they occur in like 75% of convictions. Perjury or false accusations, meaning incentivized witnesses, or what you hear called snitch testimony, occurs in 1 out of every 2 cases. So people being given a benefit in exchange for their testimony is a huge contributing factor, and is completely unreliable. Many states have started to enact legislative reforms around incentivized testimony and started to build ways in which we can start to manage getting corroborating testimony and start to kind of build foundations in which we can start to say, like, is this actually true testimony and important testimony and reliable testimony that we would accept within our courts. False confession testimony happens in 1 out of every 4 wrongful convictions, which for me was surprising. And there's many contributing factors to that. Juveniles and people with mental health or mental illness are particularly susceptible to false confessions. But that being said, anyone can falsely confess to something. Our criminal justice system is set up, and our police interrogation tactics are set up to elicit confessions, not necessarily to elicit the truth. And that sounds ridiculous, right? But the interrogation tactic that is used by most police departments here in the United States is something called the Reid technique. And it is designed to make a suspect uncomfortable. It is designed to make a suspect believe that the most logical thing to do is to agree with police. Police can lie to a suspect about evidence that they have at their disposal, that maybe a co-defendant has already given a confession. And so what happens, and I will kind of give you some stories about all of these factors, is that it becomes the most logical thing to do in order to get out of that situation, that very stress situation, in order to tell the police what they want to hear. And police are able to set up a situation where they say, they make kind of a story for you that it would be socially acceptable if you did this, if you just told us this, and we'll let you go home. 1 out of every 3 cases has faulty or misleading forensic science, something that we call junk science. many forensic science that we once thought were kind of foolproof are being questioned. So things like fingerprint evidence, anything that is compared, one thing is compared to another by a human being, is obviously subject to the mistakes that that human being is subject to. And then one of every two cases has official misconduct. So misconduct by police officers or by prosecutors. Usually what we see is that exculpatory evidence or evidence that is good for the defendant or good for the defense is withheld or suppressed by the prosecution.
Now, why, just a quick question there on that slide. So why would police do that? Why would they be withholding evidence that proves someone is innocent? Why would they be trying to trick someone into falsely confessing? You know, we sit here and we think they clearly want to get the perpetrator so it doesn't happen again down the line. They want the right person in prison. But when you look at this graph, it doesn't seem that way. So why are they more interested in closing the case than finding the real person?
So I think it's easier for me to explain when I tell you kind of in story form. So let me jump ahead to our clients.
Okay.
And give you some examples of kind of how this plays out in real life. Okay, so Greg Brown is a great example of incentivized testimony and also prosecutorial misconduct. Greg is a case, is my case here in Allegheny County. There's an arson case. He was convicted when he was 17 of setting fire to his family's home. And unfortunately, during the fire suppression efforts, 3 Pittsburgh firefighters lost their lives. It was a very high-profile case here in Allegheny County due to the deaths of the Pittsburgh firefighters, one of which was a woman. It's the first woman firefighter to die during fire suppression efforts in the history of Pennsylvania. Immediately after the fire, the ATF was called in because of the high-profile nature of the investigation. And the ATF determined that it was an incendiary fire, meaning that it was purposefully set within hours of the fire. Unfortunately, they didn't have a suspect in the case for about 11 months. But they were under quite a bit of pressure in order to, once they had determined that it was arson, they were under quite a bit of pressure to name that suspect. Greg was 16 at the time. Right around that 11-month period, he was arrested for marijuana possession. And instead of probation, in my opinion, any other 16-year-old would have received for simple marijuana possession as a juvenile, he was sent to Vision Quest, which is a juvenile boot camp facility. When he got to Vision Quest, the ATF then started to contact every single one of his bunk mates to see whether he said anything about the fire that occurred at his home. One of his bunkmates, a 15-year-old, was contacted over 25 times. That bunkmate was offered $15,000 for information leading to the conviction, arrest and conviction of Greg Brown. After he was offered that $15,000, all of a sudden that bunkmate had information that Greg Brown had confessed to setting the fire to his home. Right around that time, also, a $15,000 reward was sent around the community and also on the news. And a neighbor, 20 minutes after seeing the news, went down to the local fire department and said that he saw Greg Brown standing outside his house, viewing his work after he set fire to his house. This was important information because Greg had always had an alibi. He was grocery shopping with his mom, and that they didn't get back to the house until after fire personnel was on the scene. So the neighbor's information put a hole in Greg's alibi. Greg was arrested. They went to trial. The two witnesses testified during testimony. The two witnesses testified that they did not expect any kind of benefit. The 15-year-old testified that the reason he was testifying was because his mom told him it was the right thing to do, which from a lawyer's perspective, there is no way to cross-examine that. And the neighbor said that he came forward 11 months later because he didn't realize it was important information, and that he had spoken with fire personnel on the night, but that he just didn't realize seeing Greg outside the house on that night before fire personnel were on scene was important, and that he came forward when he realized it was. For 12 years, the Commonwealth and the government said no witnesses were paid, no witnesses were paid, no witnesses were paid. They said that to the Commonwealth, the trial court. They said that to a federal court. They said it to every single appellate court in every single pleading. When the Pennsylvania Innocence Project got involved, through investigation, we found two redacted checks, one for $5,000, one for $10,000. We presented it to the government, and all of a sudden they said, oh, okay, witnesses were paid, but they didn't realize they were going to be paid prior to trial, so they weren't incentivized. It was just a happy surprise that they received money after trial. And so we didn't have to tell you that they were going to be paid. Now, they were paid months after trial. So every time they say no witnesses were paid, they lied. We brought that in front of the court, and we contacted those witnesses, and they testified that they not only knew that they were going to be paid, but they counted on it. They testified because of it. Greg was granted a new trial, and he was released from, his conviction was vacated. He was released from prison 2018. And instead of Greg's conviction being null prost or withdrawn, the government, the Commonwealth, decided that they did not want to be in front of the judge that heard about their misconduct. And so they withdrew state charges and indicted Greg federally. So Greg is facing a federal retrial still to this day. The prosecutor that prosecuted Greg 23 years ago is the prosecutor still on his case today. And the judge that sat on his case 23 years ago as a state judge is a federal judge, and he is the judge on Greg's case today. You ask why? How can that be, right? And why would a prosecutor want to withhold evidence, I think that every prosecutor gets into the job because they want to protect their community, they want to be a good prosecutor, they want to uphold the law, right? And it's a slippery slope of, you think you have the right person, and if you bend the rules in in order to effectuate justice, because you are so sure that you are right, it's arrogance, and
Yeah.
can't ever bend the rules. You cannot ever bend the rules. They are there for a reason. And you cannot ever be so sure that you are right that you take it into your own hands. And when you do, it ends up with cases like this, where you then end up covering and covering and covering and covering, and the lie evolves and evolves and evolves, right? And
so
you're not ever on the side of good then.
Right. And there's no recourse, no punishment for them lying all this time about whether they were paid. I mean, that's a simple yes or no question. And they are just, I mean, if anybody else would lie about things like that, right, there'd be punishment.
Right.
But law enforcement gets away with it.
In the course of their job, they have absolute immunity.
Yeah.
Wasn't he in SCI Dallas?
Greg?
Yeah.
I think he was, yeah, for a while.
Yeah, I did 6 years with him.
Yeah, Greg is a wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah,
Wow.
I knew him. Used to work out around him. He good dude.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Wow. So with this in mind, clearly there's serious problems. Why is it so hard once you have proven or can prove someone's innocence? Why is it so hard to get them out? Like, you know, I've heard stories about, there was recently one on Pennsylvania's death row where in 2018, they threw out everything. They said he's innocent, but yet he was still in prison 2 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that so hard to accomplish, to get somebody out of prison when they're innocent?
Pennsylvania is one of the most difficult post-conviction laws in the United States. Once you are convicted, it is almost impossible to overturn. It's for a variety of reasons. We have very, very strict time bars. Our time bars are jurisdictional. What that means is that if you miss it by even 1 day, there is no like equitable tolling. And what that means is the court just absolutely loses jurisdiction. So the court doesn't have a mechanism for being able to like look at your case and say, okay, you had a reasonable explanation for missing this deadline. We're going to give you an extension. The court just loses power in order to hear your claim whatsoever. Also, once you are convicted and that judge or that jury determines that you are guilty, the focus becomes judicial economy. And what I mean by that is the focus becomes efficiency, as opposed to looking at the merits of your claim. And so the court does not want to be inundated with claims from convicted individuals. And so it is just really a, let's make sure that, and the presumption is that you received a fair trial. That is always the presumption. Even though we know that is not the case. Many times that is not the case. The presumption is, and it is a very high burden to get the court to pause for a second and to say, okay, there might be something here. Let's give this convicted individual a moment. We have other procedural bars. If, for example, you have a claim that you could have brought at an earlier time and didn't, you are deemed to have waived that claim. If you have a claim that you did bring and you did not litigate it well, you are deemed to have previously litigated that claim and now you cannot bring it again. And so there are just, at every turn, there are procedural roadblocks for getting your claim into court and hearing the actual substance of that claim. And so it is a needle in a haystack every time. When you hear of an exoneration, it is years and years and years of kind of beating your head against a wall in order to have achieved that 1 in a million exoneration.
And where does Pennsylvania rank in terms of the other states, in terms of the procedures like you were talking about, how difficult it is? Are we kind of the same as others, or is it harder in Pennsylvania than other places to free somebody?
Yes, it is much. It is much, much, much more difficult.
Wow. And how do you have statistics? This is probably difficult to determine, you know, because I would imagine a lot of people in prison say they're innocent. But do you have any idea how many innocent people may be in prison, like in Pennsylvania or across the country? Is there any way to determine that number?
Yes, so I think that's a common misconception. So I was a public defender prior to being with the project. Have been a public defender kind of all of my career. And I can count on one hand how many clients claimed innocence. I get asked that a lot. Isn't everyone in prison innocent? No. No, many people in prison. One of our first conversations between lawyer and client was, I messed up. Tell me what to do now. The people who claimed innocence and stuck to innocence were few and far between. Many people took responsibility for their actions. Now, some people, the first conversation was, I didn't do this. And then as they grew to trust me and to trust that I was serious about my job and about my responsibility to them, we're like, all right, Liz, I did this and this, and here's the truth of the matter. And that's completely reasonable with just growing to trust your lawyer and the lawyer-client relationship, right? Sure. Experts estimate that anywhere from 3 to 10% of everyone convicted here in the United States is actually innocent of the crime for which they were convicted. Mm-hmm. So if we were just very conservative with that, let's just say, 3%, that means that 10,000 people every year are convicted of a crime that they did not commit. And we really have to think about that kind of like holistically. That's not just 10,000, men and women. That is 10,000 men and women with children, with families, with mothers and fathers. And so it is really affecting, our communities, our children. And so it's huge. It's a huge number. And many of those people, like I said before, we will just never get to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to note that it's not, that number isn't something that lives out there and doesn't affect you. That could be you on any given day.
Absolutely.
Any given day, anybody. More so if you're a person of color. So,
quite literally, all someone has to do is accuse you of something.
That's right. And if you don't have a camera on you 24/7, which nobody does, how do you prove you're innocent, right? And like you said, all you have to do is cross the wrong person on any given day, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and you could be down this path So criminal justice reform is not just to protect the people who are in prison now, make sure they're getting a fair shot, a fair trial, but it's really to protect all of us. And that's why it's important that we all need to wake up and realize that these problems don't belong to someone else. There are problems. And even if it hasn't touched you, and even if it never touches you, it's still gonna impact someone's life, someone's family, your neighbor. It affects communities, it affects the economy. It's an enormous problem that we all need to care about. And you know, Pennsylvania just passed some police reform, which is great. But for us to sit back and applaud them and say, well, now Pennsylvania's fixed, we're done, that is far from the truth, right?
It's just a Band-Aid.
Yes.
Well, and I think some things to think about with that police reform is that, it starts the discussion, which is step one, right? But there's a couple of things that we need to continue to ask for. First and foremost, that the database only gives other police departments information on final adjudications, and a very, very small percentage of complaints result in final adjudications. So we want police departments to have more information on all citizen complaints on a police officer, not just the final adjudications. And then also we want it to be public. It should be part of the right to know statute here in Pennsylvania. It shouldn't be kind of a secret database just available to police departments. It should be something that like the Pennsylvania public should be able to have access to. So things to consider asking, your legislators for is just, more than final adjudications. We want to know when citizens are complaining about our police officers, whether they're justified or not. You can make that decision, right? And we want it to be part of the right to know.
What do you think is the number one issue that could be the most impactful? Do you think it's qualified immunity? And maybe we should explain what qualified immunity is for the people who don't know. Could you?
It's 12 o'clock.
Sorry, that's my computer. Could you explain that? And then if that is not it, what would be the one thing that makes the most change?
Okay, so qualified immunity would just allow a gateway for civil liability for prosecutors and for police officers within the realm of their employment. So absolute immunity pretty much cuts off civil liability for any conduct that occurs while they are conducting the aspects of their job.
It pretty much, if I'm correct, means that they can really do what they want and say that they had a legitimate reason in doing their job. That's why they did it, whether it was right or wrong, and they can't be held liable for it. Or the outcome.
It's like, so as long as they can couch it in terms of like the, legitimate aspects of their employment. So investigation, paperwork, any kind of like, employment requirements of their job, then they can say that they have immunity for those specific functions, right? If they had, even if it is intentional misconduct, Qualified immunity would take that away. So they would say intentional misconduct, even if you are within those aspects of your legitimate employment. If you have intentional misconduct within the legitimate aspects of your employment, you can be civilly liable, personally liable for that intentional misconduct. And so hopefully it would have a deterrent effect, because prosecutors and police officers would think twice before making themselves personally liable for intentional misconduct. I would hope.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, do you
I don't know what would be. I mean, I think compensation would be wonderful for our clients. It means so much right now when you are, even when you are guilty and you were released from, from incarceration. And I think, I think there are of two minds. Parole can be restrictive, and being in state supervision, can be good and bad. But having the transition back into society can be, depending on, your parole agent, can be good and bad, can be helpful and not helpful. But for the exonerated, they have zero transition. They're given their clothes in a garbage bag, and that is it. They don't have any kind of no work readiness, no mental health treatment, nothing, no drug and alcohol, nothing. Because you don't have a conviction anymore. So you are out of the state contract. So you don't get compensated for the time you are wrongfully convicted. You don't get any kind of transition back to society. You leave prison and nothing. So compensation for the wrongfully convicted would be wonderful. I think immunity, qualified immunity would be wonderful. What would be most impactful? I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that we need to have a conversation about all of it.
Yeah.
And we can't stop talking about any of it.
And I think it's sad that you can't say one thing would make a difference. I think, to me, that single sentence shows just how broken it is. That there's no one thing that's going to fix it. It's so many things that are contributing to where we are, and how certain portions of our society, are people of color, people who are poor, they're affected as well. And when they come out of prison, depending how long they've been, they've never even used a cell phone, right? Let alone have skills to get into the job market that exists today versus when they went in. Everything changes so quickly. And like you said, we have got to keep our foot on the gas right now, because if we let up, nothing is going to change. If we let up, it's all going to be thoughts and prayers forever. And when we let our legislators get away with not legislating, this is where we end up, right? We didn't wake up today or 4 months ago and say, overnight this happened. We've been fighting for social justice and for criminal justice reform for decades. So our legislators can't even say that they just learned about it and they're just now trying to do something about it. They've had an opportunity for decades to get this done, and they're not doing it. So we really need to hold them accountable. And we do have a question. I'm going to let her ask it, because I'm not quite sure what the question is on the chat. So Pam, I'm going to let you ask your question, if you don't mind. Pam Zidek, if she's still with us.
It seems like, as I've been listening, a lot of information about, talking to your legislators and stuff like that, about all these different issues. Are any of like the significant issues like in the police reform bill or law. You talked about the false confessions and people that give false testimony, stuff like that. That should be, since it's the police that are actually doing the investigation, is that something that needs to be reformed legislatively? I mean, what can our legislators do? And I have not read the police reform law and whether or not that just concerns the chokeholds and the excessive abuse. So I don't know if any of these issues that you're speaking about are in there.
Yeah, so thanks, Pam. That's a great question. So the incentivized testimony or like snitch testimony is not included, but it is absolutely something that could be addressed legislatively. And a couple of states have started to address it legislatively. I know California and Maryland and Delaware have all done some legislative fixes to provide some like support for legislatively for incentivized testimony. And what I mean by that is, in order for an incentivized witness to testify in the courts, there has to be some underlying corroborating evidence backing up that incentivized witness. So you can't just have an incentivized witness who is like a jailhouse informant come in and say, oh, they confessed and here is the confession. And all of that information was also available on the news. And I'm gonna say that this person just randomly confessed to me and I'm gonna get a deal on, you know, my pending charges as well. There has to be some other evidence that corroborates that witness's statement that was not available publicly, that was not, you know, given to that witness by the police. There has to be something else that like supports that witness's statement. Legislators absolutely could enact that type of statute here in Pennsylvania that makes that other supporting evidence mandatory here in Pennsylvania before we have incentivized witnesses testify in our cases. If you look in Allegheny County, there's been a couple of cases where incentivized witnesses have kind of bit the Commonwealth in the butt. So I think that you will see that that particularly in Allegheny County, they will be more reluctant to use incentivized witnesses, but that wears off. So absolutely, we should be pressing our legislators to enact legislation like that. And I can absolutely pass along to Patty to post those different states that have enacted legislation so that you guys can look at that legislation kind of across the board and you know, say like, hey, Pennsylvania, we want legislation like this here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 100%.
And what can, if somebody feels that they've been wrongly convicted, how do they get a hold of you? Do they have to pay for your services?
No.
No. So
we're a nonprofit organization. All of our services are 100% pro bono. If a loved one, you know someone who has been wrongfully convicted, they have to write to us. They will send it to our Philadelphia office. That's where our intake department is. They'll send it to the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. That's 1515 Market Street, Suite 300, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania 19102. You can also access all of our information on our website, Pennsylvania or PA, so sorry, www.painnocence.org. And you can find out all about, all of our exonerees, all of their stories are online. And obviously, if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate. You can always email me. My email is DeLosa, D as in dog, ELOSAE @duq.edu. And I will always direct you to kind of the right place to send a letter. We do not accept letters from loved ones for a variety of reasons. The biggest reason is because we have to establish a confidential relationship, and for prospective clients, once we receive that letter from a prospective client, we establish that confidential relationship. So anything that they tell us is confidential, and we want them to be able to tell us, obviously, the truth about their case, and so it has to come from that inmate.
And if people want to get involved, whether it's with you or with criminal justice reform, if they want to donate, how can they do that? And what does the Pennsylvania Innocence Project need the most from Pennsylvania citizens?
Money.
Okay.
That's horrible to say, but yeah, I mean, everything we do is funded by private citizens. And if you and your voices, money and your voices. We need you to speak up and to continue to speak up about the issues. Get on our website, and you can donate on our website. You can always email me. I will direct you. If you need information about who to speak up to, I can direct you to that. Also, our website can do that. But I am at your disposal, and our website can direct you to volunteer opportunities as well.
Awesome. And we've gone over a little bit, I apologize, but is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to? Because I know we kind of pushed you out of order in your slides, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
But was there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
I don't think so. Hopefully I got to everything everyone was curious about.
I think so. If anybody has any last questions, now would be the time, or comments. Otherwise, I will say thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate everything you do, everything your organization does, and leaving the Virgin Islands to move back to Pittsburgh. Like, you are seriously committed to the cause.
Yes.
So,
Yes, thank you.
So much.
Patty, I do have a question.
Okay, sure.
I just wanted to ask Liz if she had a message to incarcerated people who are claiming innocence. What would it be? Because I'm hearing a lot of discouragement. Almost everybody that I know of who's incarcerated and claiming innocence says, I tried the Innocence Project and they turned me down. And so I'm just not understanding why all of them got turned down. And I'm wondering if you have a message for those who are just claiming innocence and feeling discouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that we are a small, very small nonprofit organization. I am a one-woman show over here in Pittsburgh. And, we have 4 full-time lawyers that we litigate all over the state of Pennsylvania. I would tell them to write us. I would tell them to write me. I'll give you my address. I am at Pennsylvania Innocence Project, Tribone Building, TRIBONE Building, 914 5th Avenue, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15219. Attention, Elizabeth DeLosa. Obviously, we have an eligibility criteria. You have to be a convict here in Pennsylvania with a Pennsylvania state conviction. You have to have 10 years left on your sentence. And that's because it takes us so long to do that investigation process and so long to do the litigation process. You have to be past the direct appeal stage. If you still have a lawyer, then hopefully you will achieve relief before you need us. And so if you're past the direct appeal, usually you're past the process where you have the right to an attorney. I would just say keep the hope. We are out here. We are fighting in dozens and dozens of cases. We have achieved an exoneration for 19 men and women here in Pennsylvania since 2009, which is more exonerations than most innocence organizations. Just know that we are working and we are fighting, and we do care so much. I do. Keeps me up at night, every night.
So much. I really do appreciate it. As being another one-woman office, I know what you're talking about. And one more real quick question. Lifers, what percentage, I guess, high percentage of appeal, yeah.
Yes.
But you take them on, even though they have way more than 10 years left on their sentence.
Yes. Oh, yes. Most of our clients are lifers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Please, and I just want you to know that, like, I'm at your disposal. I will always take that kind of second to look at a letter, to look at an email, to respond. I don't want to miss anyone ever. So.
And do you all need help? Like, do you, if everybody listening to the replay, if they know attorneys, maybe they could, are you accepting attorneys to join the Innocence Project? Are you accepting volunteers to help sort of weed through the letters? Or, I would assume if you could boost your staff, you could handle more cases. Is that true? But then again, you need the money as well.
Right. The funding, absolutely. Yeah, we're always looking for funding and applying for grants for additional staff members. We just hired an intake attorney, which will be helping us to streamline our volunteer process. And so, yes, any attorney that is interested in helping us to do our case review process, please email me, and I will connect you with our new intake attorney who will connect you with a case review.
Okay. And there's a question. Do law students who intern, is there a possibility of getting college credits?
Yes, so we partner with every law school here in the Commonwealth. I am an adjunct with Pitt and Duquesne. Both have clinical programs, so the law students do 10 hours each week, and then I teach a class for both schools. So it's 2 hours each week, and they receive like 6 hours of credit for that class. Yeah. And it's a part of our mission to provide, experiential learning and train kind of the next generation of criminal defense attorneys and prosecutors to see those red flags of wrongful convictions and to be just the best of us, hopefully, when they start to practice. And especially for the new generation of prosecutors to be able to say, I'm not prosecuting this case. This
Right.
is not a good conviction.
or just being able to walk away from one that they know
Exactly.
is bad. Like,
Exactly.
let's just admit there was a mistake and do the right thing moving forward. That's all that we ask, you know. Obviously, we want those to not happen, but let's not dig our heels in and try to prove that we were right all along.
Well, to pursue justice as opposed to the conviction.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Okay, so I'm going to put, once we're done here, I will load the recording of this conversation on my Facebook page. And under the comments, I'll put all of the phone numbers and the addresses, the website. I'll put Liz's contact info in there so that you'll always have it and you'll know where to find it. Because once we jump off here, the chat's gone forever. So I'll put those in the comments. And I appreciate you being here with us and for everything you do. And hopefully,
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, hopefully we'll get our legislators on board. And if not, November is coming. So let's make sure that the people we are voting for are committed to criminal justice reform in a true and honest way.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate
Thank
you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.